Okay, let's start with a paradox. A real, living, breathing contradiction that, in a lot of ways, really defines the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a man, right? And this man dedicates his entire life to healing the human mind. He's a doctor, a clinically trained psychiatrist, someone who literally took an oath to do no harm.
Yeah, a man whose entire job is to put broken people back together.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But this same man, he looks out at the world, and specifically he's looking at the colonial world of the 1950s, and he makes a diagnosis.
Right.
And he decides that the political structure itself, this whole system of colonization, is a form of mental illness.
Yeah, the prescription he writes, it isn't therapy.
No, it's not medication, it's revolution. And we're not just talking about, peaceful protest. He prescribes violence as a necessary, almost a medical treatment for the soul of the oppressed.
It's such a striking image.
Yeah.
And it's not just some metaphor he's using. For Frantz Fanon, the violence wasn't theoretical. It was clinical.
So today we are diving deep into the life, the mind, the revolutionary fire of Frantz Fanon. And looking at this stack of research we have here, we've got biographies, military records, his own psychiatric case notes, and of course his two monumental books, it's clear we aren't just talking about a history lesson.
No, not at all. We're talking about the man who basically became the intellectual godfather of just about every major revolutionary movement from the 1960s onward.
Absolutely. You can trace a direct line from Fanon's writing to, say, the Black Panthers in Oakland.
Right, or the anti-apartheid fighters in South Africa, people like Steve Biko.
To the Iranian Revolution, and even to the academic debates on race and identity that are happening right now today. He is somehow the common thread through all of it.
He really is.
But the question that just jumps out at me from all these sources is, how? How does a comfortable middle-class kid from the Caribbean, a guy who grew up believing with all his heart that he was French, end up becoming the ultimate enemy of the French Empire?
That is the journey, isn't it? It's a tragedy in a way, but it's also this incredible story of awakening. We're going to see a man who tries, just desperately, to fit into a box.
The box of the good French citizen.
The perfect French citizen.
Yeah.
And the world just keeps smashing that box over and over again.
So we've got a roadmap for this deep dive. We're going to start in Martinique to really understand his upbringing. Then we'll look at the trauma of World War II, which I think you could argue is the first huge pivotal moment where that mask he talks about starts to slip.
For sure. And then we have to really dig into his psychiatry practice. How he completely revolutionized mental health care in North Africa is a story in itself. And then finally, the writing of The Wretched of the Earth.
Which he wrote while he was dying of leukemia.
Yeah. And we can't ignore the end of his story. His death is, it's shrouded in this Cold War mystery. It involves the CIA. It's a rabbit hole we definitely need to go down.
Okay, so let's rewind the tape. It's 1925, Fort-de-France, Martinique. The source material paints a picture that honestly was a bit surprising to me. I think a lot of people assume a revolutionary leader has to come from, abject poverty, from the bottom of the barrel. But Fanon.
Not at all. Fanon was comfortable. He was born into the Martinican middle class, what they call the bourgeoisie de couleur. His father was a customs inspector. His mother ran a hardware shop. They lived in a house where they spoke French, not Creole.
And that distinction, the language, that matters immensely in that context.
Oh, it's everything. It was the dividing line. In Martinique at that time, speaking proper French was a huge status symbol. It separated the civilized from the quote-unquote primitive. Fanon was raised, from birth, to believe that he was French. Not West Indian, not black, but French.
So in school, he's learning about the French Alps.
The French Revolution? Our ancestors, the Gauls.
Right. And the colony was legally a department of France. So the middle class, they completely bought into this idea of assimilation.
They clung to it.
He attended the Lycée Victor Schulze, which was the most prestigious school on the entire island. And when you look at the faculty list from that time, there is a name that just jumps off the page immediately. Aimé Césaire.
Yes. And this is such a crucial intersection in his life. Aimé Césaire was one of his teachers. Césaire would go on to become this massive political figure, a poet, but more importantly, he was one of the founders of the Negritude movement.
Okay, so for anyone who might not be familiar with that term, can we just quickly define Negritude in this context?
Sure. So Negritude was a literary and ideological movement that really started in the 1930s in Paris.
Yeah.
And essentially, it was a profound rejection of French cultural dominance. It was Black intellectuals from the Caribbean and from Africa coming together and saying, wait a minute, We have our own history, our own culture, our own soul, and it is valuable.
It was about reclaiming Black pride.
It is a revolution in consciousness.
So you have young Fanon sitting in a classroom thinking of himself as a French citizen through and through, but the guy at the front of the room is the one saying, be proud of your African heritage. Reject the French ideal.
It's got to be planting some seeds.
Seeds, yes. But at 17, Fanon is still a patriot. He believes in liberté, égalité, fraternité. He really does. And when World War II breaks out, that belief, well, it gets put to the ultimate test.
This is where the story takes a really dark turn. The Vichy regime. When France falls to the Nazis in 1940, the colonial government in Martinique sides with Vichy.
So they were pro-Nazi collaborators.
Yes. And this was the first profound shock for Fanon. Thousands of Vichy sailors were stationed in Martinique, and suddenly that polite veneer of French republicanism just evaporated.
Oh, God.
These sailors were openly, violently racist. Fanon watched as the colonial authorities, the Frenchmen he was taught to admire, started behaving, as he later put it, like authentic racists.
It's like the mask came off. Before, the racism was maybe more subtle, more systemic, but now you have white men in uniform literally pushing Black civilians off the sidewalk.
Exactly. And Fanon's reaction is so telling. He doesn't just get angry and, write a poem about it. He decides to fight. He escapes the island.
And the escape story is just wild. He literally runs away during his brother's wedding.
He does. It's the perfect cover. I mean, everyone is distracted, celebrating, drinking, and Fanon just slips away, gets on a boat to the neighboring island of Dominica to join the Free French forces.
He wants to fight the Nazis. He wants to save Mother France.
It's almost heartbreaking in hindsight, isn't it?
Yeah.
He is risking his life for a country that is, at that very moment, treating his people like dirt on his own island. But he believes in the ideal of France.
He really does. But that belief starts to crumble pretty quickly.
Yeah, he trains in Morocco, and this is where the disillusionment really starts to deepen. The Free French Army was completely segregated. You had the white officers at the top, then you had the Black African troops, the Tiroirs at the bottom, and then you had the West Indians, like Fanon, sort of stuck in the middle, considered more civilized than the Africans, but certainly not equal to the whites.
So there's a hierarchy of oppression even within the oppressed.
Precisely. And then he gets to Algeria. And for the first time, he sees how the French settlers, the Pieds Noirs, treat the local Arab and Berber population. He witnesses this intense Islamophobia, this intense anti-Semitism. He's starting to realize that the liberators are also oppressors.
But he keeps fighting. I mean, he fights in the Battle of Alsace. He takes shrapnel in the chest near Montbéliard. He gets the Croix de Guerre, which is a major medal for bravery.
He's a war hero.
You would think at this point he has proven himself. He is a hero of the Republic. He bled for France.
And that is where the ultimate betrayal happens, the whitewashing. This is a historical event called blanchiment, and it really explains Fanon's entire future trajectory.
I read about this in the notes, and I just had to pause. It feels like such a cold, calculated erasure.
It was absolutely calculated. So you have to picture the scene. It's late 1944. The Allies are pushing the Nazis back. They are about to cross the Rhine into Germany. This is the big moment, the symbolic victory lap.
The liberation of Europe.
Right. And Charles de Gaulle and the Allied command decide that the liberating army that marches into Germany needs to look, well, French.
And by French, they meant white.
Explicitly. They ordered the Senegalese and Caribbean units, the units that had been the tip of the spear that had bled all the way across North Africa and Italy, to be stripped of their uniforms and equipment.
No.
Yes. And they gave that gear to white recruits, some of whom were former resistance fighters, but many were just fresh volunteers who had barely seen combat.
They literally replaced the experienced Black soldiers with inexperienced white soldiers just for the visuals.
Just for the photo op. They sent Fanon and his comrades south to Toulon, away from the action, away from the glory. Fanon was sitting in a holding pattern while the white troops marched into history.
That has to be the breaking point. The cognitive dissonance just snaps.
It did. We have a letter he wrote to his brother Joby around this time, and he's just devastated. He writes, "I've been deceived, and I am paying for my mistakes. I'm sick of it all."
I've been deceived. I mean, that's the key phrase right there.
It is.
He realizes that to France, his body was useful for catching bullets, but his face was unacceptable for victory.
He realized that no matter how brave he was, no matter how French he spoke, he would never be French in the way a white man was French. He was permanently other. He was disposable.
So the war ends. He has his medal, he has his scars, and he has this profound disillusionment. He goes back to France, specifically to Lyon, to study, and he just dives into everything.
Everything. Medicine, psychiatry, but also literature, theater, and philosophy.
Yeah.
This is the intellectual incubation period. He's reading Hegel, he's reading Marx, and he's attending lectures by Maurice Merleau-Ponty.
Okay, let's stop there because phenomenology is listed as a major influence, and that's a heavy philosophical term. How do we explain that to someone who hasn't, spent 4 years in a grad school seminar?
Right. Think of phenomenology as the study of experience from the first-person perspective. It's not just about what exists objectively out there in the world. It's about how it feels to exist. How do I experience my own body? How do I experience the world? How do I experience you looking at me?
So for Fanon, it's not just an abstract idea like racism exists. It's what does it feel like in my gut, in my head, when a white person looks at me with fear or disgust?
Exactly. It gives him the language to describe the internal lived experience of racism. And this is what leads directly to his first book, Black Skin, White Masks.
Which, and this is a fun fact from the notes, was originally submitted as his medical school dissertation.
It was. He submitted a draft titled Essay on the Disalienation of the Black, and the faculty at the University of Lyon. They rejected it.
Too radical.
Too subjective. They basically told him it wasn't scientific enough. It broke all the rules. It was mixing psychoanalysis with philosophy and personal anecdotes and poetry. So he quickly wrote a very boring, very technical thesis on a neurological condition just to get his degree.
Just to check the box.
Right. And then he took the real work and got it published as a book in 1952.
So let's get into the meat of Black Skin, White Masks. The title itself is such a powerful image, this idea that to survive in a white world, the black man has to wear a white mask.
He is analyzing what he calls the performance of whiteness. Fanon argues that in a colonial society, the default setting for human is white. So for a black person to be recognized as human, they have to constantly perform to distance themselves from their own blackness.
Right, they have to master the colonizer's language, adopt their manners, their values.
It's all about trying to prove you're an exception. He talks about language specifically. He says that when a black Caribbean man speaks perfect Parisian French, the white Frenchman is shocked. They say, "Oh, you speak so well."
Which is such a backhanded compliment.
It's totally backhanded, because what it implies is, I didn't expect a creature like you to be capable of sounding like me. This is what Fanon calls the zone of non-being.
Okay, this is the core concept we need to land. The zone of non-being.
It's an ontological hell. It's a state of being where you are not granted full humanity. Fanon argues that a white man is just a man. He has the privilege of just existing. But a black man is always a black man, first and foremost. He is trapped by his skin. He is defined by the white gaze. He exists in this zone where his humanity is constantly up for debate. He isn't fully being in the eyes of the world.
There is that famous gut-wrenching anecdote in the book, the "look a Negro" moment.
Yes, it's devastating. Fanon describes being on a train or in a public space, and a little white child points at him and screams to its mother, "Look, a Negro, I'm frightened."
Wow.
And in that moment, Fanon says he is shattered. He ceases to be a doctor, a war hero, a philosopher. He says, "I was an object in the midst of other objects." He's reduced to nothing but a scary object. He's just his skin.
And the mask is the lifelong attempt to escape that reduction. But Fanon's ultimate conclusion is that the mask always fails. It never works.
It never works because the system is rigged. No matter how much culture you absorb, no matter how perfectly you speak the language, the skin remains. The gaze remains.
Now, when he tried to get this published, he sent the manuscript to an editor named Francis Jeanson. And there's a story here that I think really shows Fanon's personality. He wasn't exactly looking for a pat on the back.
No, not at all. Jeanson loved the manuscript. He was blown away by it. So he calls Fanon into his office to praise it. And Fanon, sitting there, he's defensive, he's scarred by all these experiences. He just snaps at him. He says, "Not bad for a nigger, is it?"
Talk about testing the waters. He's basically daring the guy to be racist.
He was waiting for the condescension. He assumed Jeanson was just another white liberal who was going to patronize him. But Jeanson didn't do that. He got angry. He stood up and threw Fanon out of his office.
And kicked him out.
Kicked him out. He said something like, "How dare you speak to me like that?" And that reaction, that authentic anger, that refusal to play the game, convinced Fanon that Jeanson was real. They became lifelong friends and allies.
Real recognizing real. Now, we do have to pause here and address the critiques of this book. We're reading this now, but it was written in 1952. And the notes highlight some pretty serious issues, especially around gender.
It's crucial to be honest about this. I mean, Black Skin, White Masks is a masterpiece of race theory, but its gender politics are. They're deeply flawed by today's standards.
Mhm.
Fanon is often very dismissive of black women. He critiques them for wanting to marry white men as a form of social climbing. But his analysis of black men who desire white women is much more sympathetic and complex.
And there are passages about homosexuality that are, they're rough to read now.
Very rough. He equates what he calls negrophobia with repressed homosexuality in a way that is medically and socially offensive by modern standards. He was a man of his time, and while he could see the cage of race with this incredible clarity, he was still trapped in the cages of sexism and homophobia of that era.
It's a reminder that these thinkers are complex. Not saints, but humans grappling with their own limitations and blind spots.
Absolutely.
Okay, so he's got his medical degree. He's got the book published. Now he needs a job. And in 1953, he accepts a position as the chef de service, the chief of staff at the Blainville Psychiatric Hospital in Algeria.
And this is where the theory just smashes into reality. You have to understand what psychiatric care was like in the 1950s, especially in a colony. It was basically custodial. It was about warehousing people.
Straitjackets, heavy sedation, grim cells.
Exactly. And the prevailing theory among the French doctors there was famously racist. The Algiers School of Psychiatry actually taught that North Africans had primitive, underdeveloped brains.
They literally medicalized their own racism. They argued that the native was violent because his brainstem was more developed than his cortex.
Shocking, but yes. And Fanon walks into this system and says, this is all garbage. He starts a revolution inside the hospital walls. He introduces what was then a radical idea called sociotherapy.
What does that actually look like in practice?
It means treating patients like human beings with a culture and a history. He unchained them. He got rid of the straitjackets. He set up a cafe inside the hospital. He organized football matches between wards. He brought in traditional Algerian storytellers and musicians. He even created a newspaper for the patients to write in.
So he was trying to rebuild the community that the asylum and, by extension, the entire colonial system had destroyed.
He believed that mental illness wasn't just some biological defect, it was social. He argued that if you treat a patient with dignity, if you reconnect them to their culture and their social world, they start to heal. And it worked. The whole atmosphere in the hospital transformed.
But while he's creating this little oasis of sanity inside the hospital, the world outside is going completely insane. November 1954, the Algerian War of Independence begins.
The FLN, the National Liberation Front, launches its first attacks against French rule. The French army responds with absolutely brutal crackdowns, torture, collective punishment, and Fanon is caught in the ultimate double life.
This is the part of the story that feels like it's straight out of a suspense thriller. He is a French government employee running a state hospital, but secretly,
he's part of the rebellion. He's treating the FLN fighters. They're sneaking into the hospital at night, or he's hiding them in the wards, disguised as patients or orderlies. He's patching up bullet wounds, teaching them how to manage the psychological trauma of being hunted.
But, and here is the core paradox of this period, he is also still treating the French police officers and soldiers.
By day, the French torturers, the police and soldiers who were interrogating the FLN suspects, are coming to Dr. Fanon for therapy. They are traumatized by their own violence.
Wait, just let's sit with that for a second. He is treating the victim of torture and the torturer in the same building.
Sometimes on the same day. He describes a case in his writings where a French police inspector come to him complaining that he can't sleep because he keeps hearing the screams of the men he tortured.
And what does the inspector want?
He wants Fanon to cure him, to make the nightmares go away so he can go back to work and torture more effectively.
That is just sickening. And for Fanon, that must have been the moment of absolute clarity. You can't cure the inspector. The inspector isn't the one who is sick. The entire system is sick.
That is the profound realization. He saw that psychiatry was useless, even fraudulent, if the society itself was designed to produce trauma. You cannot heal a man's mind if you are just going to send him back into a world that is fundamentally trying to break him. He realized that the colonial system was a pathogen.
So he has to make a choice. And in 1956, he resigns. And he writes this letter to the resident minister that is basically a declaration of war.
It's one of the most powerful resignation letters in history. It's just electric. He writes, "There comes a time when silence becomes dishonesty."
Silence becomes dishonesty. It gives me chills every time I read it.
He says he can no longer be responsible for sending back to the oppressor a man who has been made whole, only for him to be broken again. He resigns his post. And the French government obviously expels him from Algeria.
But he doesn't go back to Paris to sip coffee in a cafe and write memoirs. He goes to Tunis, which had become the headquarters of the rebellion in exile.
He joins the FLN officially and becomes their voice to the world.
He becomes a journalist for their newspaper, Al-Mujahid. But he's not just a writer, is he? He becomes a diplomat. He serves as the ambassador to Ghana for the provisional Algerian government.
Yes, he's traveling all over Africa, Accra, Addis Ababa, Cairo. He's meeting with leaders like Kwame Nkrumah.
What was the strategy there? Was he just trying to get political support and recognition?
It was that, but it was also highly logistical. He was trying to open a southern front. The French Navy had the northern coast of Algeria completely locked down. Fanon's idea was to run supply lines of weapons and medicine across the Sahara Desert from countries like Mali and Ghana into southern Algeria.
He was trying to unite the African continent against imperialism, practically speaking.
He was. And while he's doing all this, he writes another book, A Dying Colonialism.
Yeah.
And there's a section in there that I think is just fascinating about the sociology of a revolution. He talks about two objects, the veil and the radio.
This is Fanon the analyst at his best, looking at how culture changes under pressure.
Exactly. So take the radio. Before the war, the average Algerian peasant didn't own a radio. They saw it as the voice of France, this foreign object broadcasting in a language they might not even speak. But once the FLN started broadcasting the voice of fighting Algeria from Tunis,
suddenly everyone needed a radio. It became a lifeline. The object itself completely changed meaning.
it became an instrument of liberation. And he does the same analysis with the veil, which is such a loaded symbol, especially today.
It really is.
So Fanon analyzed it tactically. The French colonizers were obsessed with unveiling Algerian women. They would hold these big public ceremonies where women would take off their hakes, and the French would frame it as liberation.
We're saving you from your oppressive culture.
Exactly. So naturally, the Algerians resisted by clinging to the veil even tighter. It became a powerful symbol of national resistance.
But then it flips again, doesn't it?
It flips again. The FLN realized that the French soldiers at checkpoints were less suspicious of women who looked westernized. So female revolutionaries started taking off the veil, putting on makeup and European dresses, and carrying bombs and messages in their handbags right through the checkpoints.
Wow.
Then later, they'd put the veil back on because now the French were suspicious of the westernized women, and they'd hide submachine guns under the flowing cloth. Fanon shows how the culture was never static. It was fluid. It was a weapon of war.
So decolonizing the mind isn't just some abstract idea. It's about repurposing the very tools and symbols of your own culture to fight back.
That's it, exactly. But as he is doing all of this, I mean, the man is traveling constantly, writing, strategizing, running guns. His body is failing him.
It's 1960. He's just completed this exhausting, dangerous trip across the Sahara to try and open that southern front. He returns to Tunis completely wiped out, losing weight, and he gets the diagnosis. It's leukemia.
He knows he's dying. He's only 35 years old. And what does he do? He doesn't rest. He decides he has one last fight in him. He has to write his magnum opus.
The Wretched of the Earth. And he didn't even have the physical strength to type it. He dictated it.
Yes, he dictated to his wife, Josie Fanon. He was in a race against the clock, pacing the room or lying in bed, just pouring out all his final thoughts. He wanted to leave a manual for the revolution before he died.
This book is, well, it's been called the Bible of decolonization. But it is also, without a doubt, his most controversial work, and that's primarily because of that first chapter concerning violence.
This is where we have to be very precise. Fanon is so often caricatured as this, prophet of bloodlust, someone who just wanted to kill white people for the sake of it. And that is a fundamental misreading of his argument.
He's not celebrating violence, he's diagnosing it.
He's analyzing it structurally. His argument starts from a simple premise. Colonization is violence. It is not a polite agreement.
Right. He says the settlers' town and the natives' town are divided by barracks and police stations. The only thing holding the colony together is force. The colonizer didn't show up with flowers and debate points. He showed up with cannons and guns.
So for Fanon, the colonial world is a world of violence in its natural state. It's already violent. So when the native finally fights back, it's not the introduction of violence into a peaceful situation.
It's a response in the only language the colonizer has ever used, the only one he understands.
Exactly. And this is where it gets psychological. He compares the colonized person to a man who is being held down, muscles constantly tense, filled with this repressed rage. Violence, for Fanon, is the release of that pressure. He calls it a cleansing force.
That's the phrase that scares people, a cleansing force.
It's a deeply uncomfortable phrase. But what he means is that for the colonized man, who has been told for centuries that he is weak, that he is stupid, that he is submissive by nature, the act of striking the master is a profound psychological liberation.
It proves to himself that the master isn't a god. He's just a man. He's mortal.
It restores the native's self-respect. It shatters that zone of non-being. If I can hit him, he is human. And if he is human, then so am I.
But, and this is the part people who criticize him often skip, the Wretched of the Earth is not just about fighting the white man. The second half of the book is this desperate, passionate warning about what happens after the revolution succeeds.
This is the concept of neocolonialism and what he calls the national bourgeoisie.
And this is where Fanon becomes prophetic.
Absolutely prophetic. He looks at the newly independent African nations around him, and he sees a new class rising up. It's the local middle class, the lawyers, the doctors, the bureaucrats who were educated by the colonizer. And he says they just step into the shoes of the white colonizers.
They move into the governor's mansion, they drive the limousines, they wear the suits, but the oppressive system stays exactly the same.
Fanon calls them the national bourgeoisie, and he is scathing. He says they have no original ideas. Their only ambition is to become the business agent for the Western powers. They facilitate the extraction of their country's resources just like the colonizers did, but now they take a cut for themselves.
So for the peasant out in the village, the flag on the flagpole changes, but the poverty remains. The police are still brutal, but now the policeman looks like them.
And Fanon hated this class. He called them lazy and useless. He warned desperately that if the revolution didn't truly empower the rural masses, the actual wretched of the earth, it would all be for nothing. It would just be replacing one master with another.
Which is depressingly accurate for so much of the post-colonial history of the 20th century.
It is exactly what happened in country after country. And that's why the book is still read so widely today, not just for the part about revolution, but for the part that explains what went wrong afterwards.
So he finishes the book. It's an incredible achievement. He even manages to travel to Rome to meet Jean-Paul Sartre.
Right, and Sartre is so impressed he agrees to write the preface, which is a huge endorsement. It puts Fanon on the global intellectual map overnight. But Fanon himself is fading fast.
He needs specialized treatment for the leukemia.
He goes to the Soviet Union first, and they put him on some experimental drug that actually induces a brief remission. He feels better for a moment. He thinks he might have beaten it, but then he relapses hard.
And his comrades in the FLN tell him, look, the best leukemia treatment in the world is in the United States.
Specifically, the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland.
This is the twist that just feels like it's out of a John le Carré novel. The United States, the heart of the capitalist empire he despised, is the only place that might save him.
And who arranges the trip?
The CIA.
It is just bizarre. A CIA agent named Oliver Iselin handled the logistics. Fanon was flown to the U.S., but when he got there, he wasn't admitted immediately to the hospital.
And there's a huge controversy here, right?
A massive one. He was kept in a hotel room in Washington, D.C. for several days. During that time, he developed pneumonia. He was weak, freezing, and untreated. Some biographers and historians, like Lewis Gordon, note that it has become orthodoxy in some circles to suggest this was deliberate.
That the CIA wanted to debrief him or maybe just let him die?
Exactly. Others argue it was just bureaucratic incompetence, that they were figuring out logistics.
We'll probably never know the full truth, but eventually he is admitted to the hospital under a fake name.
Ibrahim Omar Fanon. But by then it was too late. He died on December 6, 1961. He was 36 years old.
36, it's incredibly young. And he died just months before Algeria officially won its independence in 1962. He never got to see the victory that he gave his life for.
His body was flown back to Tunisia, and then the FLN smuggled him across the border into Algeria. He was buried in a martyr's graveyard on Algerian soil as he had wished.
But if the man died, his ideas were just getting started. Let's talk about the legacy. Because The Wretched of the Earth hits the shelves right after he dies, and it just catches fire, especially in the United States.
Oh, you cannot tell the story of the Black Power movement in America without Frantz Fanon. It's impossible.
The notes we have mention that Bobby Seale, the chairman of the Black Panther Party, specifically brought the book to Huey P. Newton when he was in jail.
It became their handbook.
Yeah.
The Panthers made it required reading for all new members. If you wanted to join the party, you had to read Fanon.
So how did it shape them? Was it just the concerning violence chapter?
No, I think that's a simplification. It was the whole analysis. It was the community part. Look at the Panthers' 10-point program. They demanded an education that taught their true history. They demanded an end to the robbery by the white capitalist. This is pure Fanon's language.
And the community programs, like the Free Breakfast for Children program, that connects back to Fanon's sociotherapy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Fanon taught that you have to restore the humanity and dignity of the people first, feeding children, providing free medical clinics. This was about showing the Black community that they were worthy of care. It was about building that new man that Fanon was always talking about.
And his influence wasn't just in the U.S., Steve Biko in South Africa.
Biko's Black consciousness movement is deeply, deeply indebted to Fanon. You know that famous Biko quote, "The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed." That is a direct riff on Fanon.
Right.
Biko understood that before you can fight apartheid laws on the books, you have to fight the inferiority complex that apartheid puts in the Black mind.
And Che Guevara.
She was a fan. He was particularly interested in Fanon's theories on the peasantry being the true revolutionary class, not the urban proletariat like in classical Marxism. Even in Iran, an intellectual named Ali Shariati used Fanon's ideas to help frame the Islamic Revolution. The idea of rejecting Western cultural intoxication and creating a new, authentic man.
That is amazing. A secular atheist psychiatrist from the Caribbean is influencing Islamist revolutionaries in Tehran. That just shows you the power and universality of his diagnosis of the colonial condition.
It does. And that legacy continues right up to today. In academia, you have a whole field called Afro-pessimism thinkers, like Frank B. Wilderson III. They take Fanon's zone of non-being, and they argue that it wasn't just a feature of colonialism. They argue it's still the basic operating system of the world, that civil society itself is structured around anti-Blackness.
So Fanon is not just some historical figure. He's a lens for understanding our world right now in 2026.
He absolutely is. And that really brings us to the big so what? Why should someone listening to this right now, maybe you're driving to work, maybe you're at the gym, why should you care about Frantz Fanon?
For me, it brings us right back to the beginning. It brings us back to the masks.
It does. Fanon asks us to look at the performances we all put on. I mean, we might not be living in a formal colony, but we all live in a world of hierarchies, economic, racial, social. How often do we code switch? How often do you change your voice, your clothes, your opinions, just to fit into a zone of being that has been defined by someone else?
And that warning he gave about neocolonialism is just haunting. We see it play out every time a man of the people gets elected and then proceeds to sell out his country to the highest corporate bidder.
The national bourgeoisie is alive and well. And Fanon's ultimate question remains completely unanswered. Once you defeat the monster, how do you make sure you don't become the monster?
That is the heavy thought we're going to leave you with. On his deathbed, dictating his final words, Fanon said this: "Let us not pay tribute to Europe by creating states, institutions, and societies which draw their inspiration from her. For Europe, for ourselves, and for humanity, comrades, we must turn over a new leaf, we must work out new concepts, and try to set afoot a new man."
He wanted us to invent something new.
Yeah.
Not to copy the West, not to just react against the past, but to create a completely new definition of what it means to be human.
And looking around the world today, I think it's safe to say we are all still working on that assignment.
We definitely are.
Thank you for diving deep with us into the revolutionary fire of Frantz Fanon. It's a heavy topic, for sure, but an essential one.
It was a pleasure, as always.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Keep thinking.